Once again, hi everybody, and welcome back to first ever World Coronavirus Virtual Conference. As we are saying, as we're speaking right now, 3 billion people are locked down. This is the very first time in the history of a modern world that this kind of pandemic is taking place at unprecedented levels. So the aim of our conference once again is to have the global leaders and have global speakers around the world to bring up the topic. Definitely we are focusing on the medical aspect of the COVID-19, but we also would like to open up and make the wider spectrum of the topics that we can talk. And I have an honor today of having on one of our panels Sara Roversi, the founder of the Future Food Institute. It is a talent-based nonprofit with a global horizon that aims to build more equitable world through enlightening the world-class breed of innovators, boosting entrepreneurial potential, and improving agri-food expertise and tradition. Welcome, Sara. I'm really lucky to have you on our panel today.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here.
So thank you very much. I have a standard question to ask everybody: how your daily routine have changed because of the COVID, and how you're now logging in from Italy. So how the situation is in your country / in your city going on?
So my personal situation, of course, has changed so much because in my last 6 years, I spent all my time to connect people around the world. So I was taking at least one overseas flight per week, even more, and being part of the task force of the B20 and many other global initiatives and so on. But let's say this is not the thing that I'm missing the most, because in these days I feel strongly reconnected with all the people in my network. So I'm probably traveling more with my head than I was traveling with my body before. What I'm feeling here now, of course, is a mix of moods and feelings. We are in lockdown since almost 6 weeks. And we have been probably the front line for the Western world, facing the virus as first one. Italy is a country full of tourists traveling through our country all year long. So, of course, we are a spontaneous hub since the first years of history. So Rome and Italy has been the epicenters of many connections and exchanges. And of course, being so open and being so connected, we have been the first one attacked by this virus. In the city is tough because as humans, and this is part of also our studies and what we do, we study food. And the relationship between culture, digital transformation, and the entire food industry. And when I'm talking about food, I'm talking from farm to fork. So farmers, industries, distribution, retailers, restaurants. And of course, this sector has been the first one that have been attacked, but is also part of our basic essential needs. So us as humans have been facing, first of all, the fact of being safe. And so hospitals and all the people that are working in this sector, of course, are angels, are our warriors, are the ones saving life and trying to save as many lives as they can, even if this virus is really terrible. And second, as humans, have been trying to secure our food. And what we see that was happening here 6 weeks ago is happening every week in different parts of the world. So, of course, I can speak with the head of Future Food Institute, but I'm also speaking as a human, as all of those things are changing in our life. So we're feeling a big reset in our brains, in our daily habits. The rhythm of the days is different. I'm not going out from my home since 6 weeks. That is terrible, but this is actually how we're living now.
Yeah, so thank you very much for update from your country. Yeah, I think everybody, no one expected this to go this big, and I think it hit us first, and it hit very hard. So right now we have to cope up with the consequences. And I just wanted to outline and make sure that people understand that the food plays so essential role, and how the food industry in particular being hit hard is going to change and it's not going to be the same. I just want to give one information before I let you go with the topic is, according to Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, world has over 50,000 eatable plants, but only 16 of them are having 90% of consumption. So we only take 16 type from 50,000, and there is a problems associated with it. There is a food shortage going on even before COVID, and it's going to be even severe after that. So Sara, being one of the leading specialists of this sphere, I just don't want to diminish the importance of the food sector. So you can take and explain more in details about everything, Sara. Floor is all yours.
Thank you so much.
So let's start with the topic.
Yeah,
what topic you would like to cover?
It is interesting what you were picking. So, of course, it's one of the SDGs. So the topic of also protecting land and biodiversity. And in these days, we are actually highlighting all the issues related to food. What we are understanding is that the food industry is very disordered. The chains and talking about food as a commodity for sure has been something that has been corrupting the entire system. Of course, the big topic of tons of conference that we have been running in these years was how much we're going to feed 10 billion people. But then if you investigate within the food system, there are so many things that makes no sense. How much we're going to feed 10 billion people when we are wasting 1/3 of the food produced? So the topic of food waste is a huge issue. And where this food is wasted. In these days, when we're stuck in home, I'm going to share some data about the survey that we are going to publish today. So we are wasting almost nothing. We are learning by doing. So changing and resetting our lifestyle, we are becoming better humans. So it's an interesting thing. In these days, humans are changing habits that are probably bringing us back in the history when the life was slower, but also with habits that takes care more about the planet and the health of people. So what we're seeing here in these days, of course, is that the first effect of this pandemic with social restriction have been affecting, of course, our consumption out of home and all the restaurants industry. And I'm going to share with you some slides because I think can be interesting also to see some numbers and some iconic infographics that can help us to better understand what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
So from 2015, as you were mentioning, the United Nations have been publishing the SDGs. And if you investigate within the SDGs, you see that all the SDGs are interconnected, and all of them anyway are related to food in some way. And when we talk about food, we're talking about the basic and essential needs of humans. Food is energy, is love, is life, is culture, is family, is rituals. So food is not just what we're eating, but is related to our social interaction. So this is the way and the why food is so much related to the crisis we are facing. And so now, of course, within the lens of COVID, we are starting also to see how SDGs can play a very important role to set the stage, to restart the world with a new positive pace. So within the Future Food Institute, we have been investigating through the years on how people, digital transformation and culture actually have been corrupting, changing, evolving our relationship with environment. So how we produce food, where we produce food, how we taking care of the ecosystem around us, how we are transforming food. So all the topic of circular economy, industry 4.0, how humans started changing the way they produce food. The topic of access to food. We're talking about access to food in these days, but in the last decades, no one was wondering where I'm producing my food. Everybody was just talking about security and safety, but no one was wondering about food sovereignty. How might the countries are producing food? And then, of course, during the years, in the last years, food tech and innovation in the food system have been very focused on health and the superpowers of food. So making food more, let's say, functional. Then the lifestyle had been completely disrupting our habits. Digital with dark kitchens, delivery, and all the startup, the millionaire startup that came up in the last decades have been completely changing our lifestyle. And this reflects also the way how entire countries have been developing real estate. There are cities in which there are houses without kitchen. The new houses in the big metropolis have been built in the last years without a kitchen. Can you imagine how they are facing the lockdown without having a kitchen in homes? It's unbelievable to think about how technology and the cultural revolution we have been facing and been attacking so much our eating habits. And we're feeling now in these days really the lack of that, and how food is related also to our well-being in an holistic way. The last focus of our work within the Institute is the topic of awareness. And I'm really happy to share that with you because we're focused on understanding how people are getting information. Fake news has been driving the choices of consumers, making them, say, able to do not the right choice for their health and the environment, but making the wrong choices. And of course, we are now trying to understand how we can redesign a better internet to make more conscious choices for that. So in these days, we are all investigating all of that. And we start from understanding how the eating lifestyle has been completely disrupted. At Future Food, we have an office in Shanghai, one in Tokyo, one in San Francisco, and one in Italy, that is our hometown. And of course, we've been seeing the effect of the virus starting from China and then lightly going in Japan and around Asia, but then disrupting everything, coming to Italy. So we've been tracking the numbers, of course, with the global lens. At the beginning, that was the effect that started in China, and we see that the numbers that they have been seeing are the same numbers that after a month we have been seeing also here, and that we're seeing also now in the Western world. So the world of food industry now in phase 1 with the lockdown, and also in phase 2 and phase 3, is going to be completely disrupted. How you can run a restaurant with social distance rules? You cannot even go break even, because if in a table you were putting 4 people and now you can put 1, you cannot make enough income to support the entire industry. So the entire world of food service is going to be completely disrupted. And we've seen that, of course, the world of canteens, public procurement, you know how many millions of people are not eating in homes every single day, in schools, in factories, in industries, everywhere. And of course, those kind of situations are, of course, making the entire industry that now is employing millions of people, delivering millions of meals, but employing also millions of people all around the world, that are going to face years of terrible crisis. So from the consumer perspective, as I was saying before, we started as citizens to reset our set of priorities. And probably all of you are familiar with the Maslow pyramid, but what we have been seeing is that week 1, everyone was going in the grocery store, buying all the long shelf life product, canned food and so on, like we were in a war. And there were nothing in the grocery store that were made empty in an hour. And so we, for the first time, faced the phenomenon of, okay, we are gonna all starve. There's gonna be food scarcity, and so let's secure our food. Then we started investigating, what's this food? Is it safe? So zero-touch delivery, zero-touch supermarket, any kind of safety rules that after 10 days have been set in place. And that affects the entire industry that had to change the way they're producing, put in masks, security screen, and all the things that were basically allowing them to keep going producing and providing food for everyone. But then, after 3-4 weeks, we started wondering where this food comes from, because many companies, many industries that are procuring food commodities far from here started struggling. They didn't have the ingredients to produce and to transform food. And then we had all the farmers, the small farmers that were struggling. Why? Because they don't have access to the big retailers and to the big food chain, because the small farmers are selling in markets. So in a way, we had supermarkets that were struggling to find the food to put in the shelves, and farmers, so retailers that were struggling, and farmers that couldn't deliver the food because they didn't have the distribution chain. So now we're starting wondering, what's the right chain? Not a long chain, a short chain. What's the right chain? What does it mean, right chain? A right chain is a chain that is creating value within all the dots, from farm to fork. And this is creating inclusion, this is creating fairness, and of course, prosperity for all. And so, of course, these days we are really restructuring, rethinking, what does it mean, a food system that is going to be inclusive, safety, and sustainable and good for all? And this is our basic essential need. So this is not a secondary question. This is a primary question that world leaders, citizens, entrepreneurs have to wonder. We're also driving a survey within our community. And it's pretty interesting to see what is coming up out of this survey. I'm going to share with you the full link of the entire report, but I'm just picking some of the highlights. First of all, we're learning so much while we are here stuck in homes. Before that, the numbers of the food waste made in our homes was completely crazy. We were out of home the entire week, and we were arriving the weekend, and there were a lot of stuff expired in our fridge, and we had to throw away a lot. That was the basic pattern in each family. Now, cooking in homes, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we care so much about our fridge, our food, and what we buy. And the 60% of people now is wasting almost nothing. And the 36% of people is wasting much less than before. So it's a huge success. We have been advocating and telling people not to waste food for decades, and only now that we are forced to be here, we are spontaneously becoming aware about what we waste. It's super interesting. As humans, we are bettering our habits. We are bettering our behaviors. Then, the 42% of people is saying that are eating better than before. And just the 15 of them are eating not better than before, but worse than before. The rest, pretty much the same. Then, they're cooking. And the fact that they're cooking means that they are consuming less preserved food. And preserved food, of course, is full of ingredients that sometimes are not very healthy for us. And so the 86% of them are cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this reflects so much on what they're buying. Because if you see what they're buying, how they compose their grocery, they are buying eggs, flour, all the ingredients. They are become all baker. They are preserving food. They are producing pickles, yogurts. So the homes are becoming kitchens of restaurants, probably. They are becoming all cooks. And this is pretty interesting because they are bettering their eating lifestyle. And this affects, of course, at the long term, also on the cost of health, on the cost of many other elements, because they can live better, longer, and healthier. So this is a pretty interesting effect. And if you study the double pyramid of food, you see that the better choice for health reflects perfectly the better choice for environment. So it's a pretty interesting and inspiring inputs that we are getting and learning from bottom up, let's say. Last thing, we're asking what they're missing the most. And this is the highlight from just the Italian population, but we have now all the patterns from other countries. Italians are saying that they're missing pizza in the pizzeria, coffee espresso in the bar, and artisanal gelato. And this
I
is
miss that
amazing.
too. I had those
But
three
you
things
know,
in Tashkent as well.
the thing is that the things that are emerging in every country are highlighting the food identity of the country and the food identity of the country. So this is amazing because we have a pattern of which are the icons. Each one is missing the most iconic food of his, say, part of his DNA. So I think it's pretty interesting to see that. And then there are the learnings. So the learnings is that actually while we are restarting, we are reconnecting with our body, first of all. So this is a very interesting thing. Our choices are not driven by efficiency and just money driven, but are driven by quality, taste. So all the elements of reconnection are coming back. Then we are reconnecting with our community. And the topic of food that have been always channeled into food service and food commodities, so something that is losing the entire values, the set of values related to that, now is turning into care, the world of care, taking care of our community, taking care of who I'm feeding, who I'm cooking for. It's so strong. And of course, the fact of switching our mindset from the concept of giving a service and the concept of taking care, it's of course resetting all the sets of values. So through food, we are taking care of health, taking care of environment, taking care of all the feeders. Now there are tons of campaigns, save the cooks, save the farmers, save the restaurants. People care about the one that are feeding them or were feeding them before. So this is super strong. And last thing, we're reconnecting with the broader food system. So before, we were all focused on owning things. I want to own the chain. I want to own everything. Now we're focused on the topic of accessibility. And the topic of chains and networks is, of course, now accelerated, as growing exponentially. And now more than ever, we're understanding that being part of a chain is becoming one of the elements of the essential needs. We need to be safe and healthy. We need to have food. But as we are connected now, we need to have access to the networks and we need to be connected with the network. This is one of the other essential needs that we are highlighting in these days. So this is the most important picture, and this is a white picture, is a white screen, is a white piece of paper. And this is the main message. Out of this crisis, we are learning so much. And we need to be very good because we have this in front of us. We need to be brave to rewrite the rules, rewrite the right rules to start back again, not making the same mistakes we have been doing for decades. And I know it's not going to be easy because it's so easy to go back and restart all the process that we had in our heads before. But we need to take advantage of this reset. We have lost a lot of friends, a lot of people, a huge economic damage. We need to make sure that at least this ordeal we are all living together. For the first time in history, the world is living a common bad, a common crisis that is attacking everyone. Let's make sure that this effort is not going to be wasted. So let's make sure that we are going to take this white piece of paper and we are going to rewrite our future in a better way, and can be done only together. So we think that food is a DPA center. So food, we're understanding more and more that is the little thing that connects everything. So we can talk about diplomacy through food. We need to develop a circular way of living, not just circular economy. Our life needs to become circular. Our way of producing, of productions, now must be climate smart. We cannot just extract from the land, from the earth, grabbing everything that the nature is giving us. We need to create regenerative business models. So this is the basics, because if not, we're not going to feed 10 billion people. We're not going to be 10 billion people, probably. Last, we are to be very focused on celebrating cultures and identities and make prosperity. So find which are the new KPIs for finance and economy, because finance should exist, and we need to support moral finance. We need to support moral economy and create prosperity in a more, say, conscious way. And this is the way. So we've been all focused on design thinking and being human-centered, that this has been a huge positive revolution in all the innovation. But we strongly believe, and we are strongly work on that since years, but now we see the power of that message even stronger, that we need to, say, develop the design thinking and take it to the next level, thinking about prosperity thinking and making things that the entire planet wants. So planets, people, Earth. And so this is going to be a fair way to start, say, a better future together in a more safe way. We're going to face more crises like that, and we need to be sure that we're going to face them with the right tools and overall the right mindset. And this is a message. I just bought the National Geographic 2 days ago of this month. And this is a message that you all can find, because it's the international edition. In each country, National Geographic was presenting that. We have a double choice. We can have the choice of the world that we are going to have in the next whatever years, if we're going to make the right choice. So the world we saved, how we saved the world together. And then we can have the bad choices with the world that we lost. And it's pretty easy to understand that every day from tomorrow, we're going to be in front of two questions: yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And every question can drive us to save the planet or to lose our planet. This is a strong message, but I think that this is the reality, and we're learning that in these days more than ever. And then if you want, we started this initiative, goodaftercovid19.org, and this is a global message, and all communities are involved, and our mission is to involve the 20% of the world, the one that can help us to reach the tipping point and influence the world's leaders with all the good values that we need to reset economies, to reset the entire social development for the next decades. So Good After COVID is really a message that we are delivering at the global scale, and we hope that with you, we can really build a better world and take the good after this crisis. So thank you so much, actually, for having me. But I really think that this network of people hearing us today can really be part of this 20% of the world that can drive the big change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sara. It's an amazing presentation we had. And like me, myself, I learned a lot, and we're definitely going to speak more about everything you've said. And just to begin, Enrico, you were talking about, well, first of all, the blank is like something that got me thinking. It's like we have a clean canvas, and that just to make a parallel with the National Geographic, which I'll make sure to read. I really like the idea. And the blank canvas is actually right now, we're able to draw our future. We've been taking for granted for too long everything what we had. Even I'm talking about simple people. I'm not talking about the governments, like we ourselves wasting our food. And there are so many people that go hungry a day. They don't or eat once a day. And we had the privilege of eating however amount of times we want. I think everything that, while we are self-isolating and self-reflecting, is going to change the way, the habits that we're going to do. Because you were very right. It's not a surprise, and it's not a news that we are wasting our food. We've been talking about for decades. People didn't care unless it hit them and knocked them out. So right now it knocked us out and brought us to our consciousness, saying, hey, it is severe and it's going to be different. So thank you very much for sending this positive message. So let's dive in at the moment. And definitely, I loved your initiative. We'll make sure we'll follow it up. Can we tell in brief what governments can learn? Because you have a very good expertise of working in international, intergovernment organizations such as UN. So there is a part that we have to address to world leaders, because those who are elites, the leaders, can influence masses. So at the moment, what world leaders can learn from it, what they can do? Is there any sort of a tips and suggestions from your side and from your experience, if you can share, please?
I don't know. In these days, probably I'm answering very spontaneously from the heart, because we are becoming more humans in these days, I think. And I think that probably what has been missing in the world's leaders' decisions in the last decades is having very clear in mind which are their set of values. So in these days, I'm reflecting more and more on which are the values that are driving my choices. And I'm wondering sometimes if the world's leaders are thinking when they're going to bed in the evening, which are the values that are driving my choices. And you see that sometimes the decisions that are taken driven by just financial benefits, and not values that are related to humans and human needs and human rights. And so I think that starting from going back and say, okay, let's see which is the set of values that is driving my choices. In these days, I'm seeing world leaders, not in the political environment, but in industries that are taking very brave decisions, very brave decisions. If I'm thinking about Medtronic owned the patent for the ventilators that now are the major needs everywhere in the world. At the beginning of the pandemic, they decided to make the patent free, so everyone can produce the ventilators. They could make billions out of that, but they said people first. So they decided to make the ventilator free. They decided not to accept more money from the countries that have more money to buy all the ventilators, because they said people and countries are equal. So we want that every country can have access to the ventilator. They decided to set the prices lower because they said some countries cannot afford to buy ventilators in this crisis. So I'm thinking about an industry leader like that was in front of the choice. I can make a lot of money, I can save a lot of people. They decided to save a lot of people. These are the kind of decisions that I think that leaders, both in economic environment and in policy environments, have to take. And so we need really to understand which are their values, which are the values that drive them the most. And when we start from that, then things are going to be probably easier.
So basically saying that emotional intelligence should overcome. We have to think from emotional intelligence from now. And I couldn't agree more, because what is the role of any organization, any country? It's like about people, isn't it? Yeah, securing, giving food, giving education, socially protecting people. And people are the biggest asset. And putting people first will actually put everything into right order. If you think of more of not political gain, not of geopolitical aspects of your decision making, but what it is for your people. So I think this is what makes a great leaders. All the great leaders around the world and in the past history are those who were thinking about their people. So there is a kind of universal truth about what you're saying. So, but
and it's not a naive thing, because the thing is that people, very big boss says, "Oh, this is a naive thing." Saving people means also save jobs and create employment. So you have to be very careful when you talk about that, because sometimes there are leaders that think that those kind of things are naive. But we're not talking about naive things, because securing people means also creating prosperity. In prosperity, there is well-being. Also, profit, good profit, but also health, also culture, also art, also all the other elements that society needs to develop to be healthy and well.
Yeah, this is a great point. And if we go back to the point where, like, yes, in a general, just speak from your heart, be intelligent, and put your emotions above your needs. This is great. But is there any sort of a social protocol, or is there any protocol of actions or action plan or roadmap about food security that has been out there and not being used by created by UN, by your organization, or by other organization in combination, that right now the country leaders can take that good example and try to implement? Is there any protocols? Is there any sort of a set of rules? What
Let's
you can
say
suggest?
from restaurants, the restaurant world is completely facing something that never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
So of course they are resetting everything, and every country is a little bit testing new solutions, also following a little bit the different social patterns that every country has. So we are in between the moment while we are studying all the different effects, and we are starting to imagine how the phase 2 is going to be, because probably the phase 2 is going to take months or years. So we're going to be in restriction, social restriction, with different step in the last months. And we are really now in these days working to restart and see which are the different scenarios, prototyping different effects. Probably the topic of dark kitchen and the entire restaurant world is going to change the role of those kitchens. But then logistics is still one of the crucial points. From the other perspective, the sourcing and the procurement part, I think, is the one that needs to be reshaped so much. In these days, what we are seeing is, of course, that all the industries that were buying food commodities from countries that are facing the most troubles, of course, are not getting those produce, these ingredients. So they probably are seeing that is not even, probably it was from the economic perspective cheaper to buy from far away, but now they're seeing that not even is a damage because they cannot source their ingredients, but this is of course is creating an impact on employment and on the local level. So really rethinking how reimagine the food chain, I think, is completely crucial. Rethinking the food chain and make the food chain more sustainable without keep buying, we call it kilometro zero, next door. It's not, again, a naive thing. Makes sense. We cannot ship food commodities all around the world if you can grow those food in your country. So food is not only a commodity. Food is something that has many more values than being a commodity, because we need energy and fuel.
So you actually touched the point that I wanted to ask you. Globalization, localization. So what do you see, how it's going to differ? Are we going to see vertical farming in New York, in Shanghai, and other megapolises, that not only in a country that it is easier to source from the country, but other cities going to become sort of a hybrid version where they can source just locally? Just for an example, I've been recently
I love your question.
Yeah.
I love your question. Also because every time I'm talking about vertical farmings, I have, let's say, the big advocates of farmers that are saying, oh, you don't love farmers. Yes, I love farmers. And I just launched a campaign on change.org to adopt a farmer. So I love farmers. But Newark, in New York, is a food desert. Having the biggest vertical farm there is allowing millions of people to have access to greens. They're not producing milk, they're not producing wheat, they're not producing tons of other ingredients. But if the New Yorkers can have access to greens, why not? So yes, and if I'm thinking that in the next decades, the 70% of the world is going to live in hyper-urbanized cities, in megalopolis, This is something that is so much needed. We need to bring smart agriculture within cities. We need to design greener cities. I want to live in a green city, but also I want to have access to the rural area around me and have access to good food. So why not having both? So there is not just a good and a right. No, we need to have a balanced way of sourcing our food.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're making a great point here, and I think that people, especially you named farmers who were like against that because they were thinking, you know what, if they grow everything, what I'm going to grow here and who I'm going to sell it. So you are saying, not necessarily that everything has to be grown. You're not having a cattle in New York. You're not having, let's say, different type of other crops. You're not having a lemon tree in New York, right?
Exactly.
You can have a certain type of commodities and food grown. And actually, I think it's a proper allocation. Why to bring parsley from 1,000 kilometers, right?
Yeah.
Where you can actually grow it in the rooftop of your building. Or, using the UV lights, you can grow it in your basement. And you actually I think this is what we're getting, because I wanted to ask you about the right chain, but I think I right now, while we're discussing, I am understanding that this is the right chain, right? Using
exactly.
adequately.
And diversity is the key. We need to protect the biodiversity, but also diversity between us. And what we are seeing is that the companies that have been developing more an ecosystem perspective in these days of crisis are facing the crisis in a much better way. The companies that have been developing like the Sequoia mindset now are struggling. The companies that have been developing the bamboo forest mindset, imagine a bamboo forest, resilient, it's flexible, moves together and support each other. They grow and they cross-pollinate in a more spontaneous way. The bamboo forest style is, of course, facing the crisis in a better way. And this is a very interesting perspective. And another one is that the companies that have been developing the stakeholders network, investing in the stakeholders, not just having brands of partners, but stakeholders that are sharing the values, of course, are facing the crisis in a much better way, instead of the other that are just managing relationship with just shareholders. So not having interest and shared values and so on. So those perspectives are perspective that I'm studying in these days, because I'm learning how I want to structure my ecosystem in the next future.
I understand. So, well, I think this conversation can go for hours, but as we said, we'd like to condense it down to the core. And I think we kind of initiated, and thank you very much for sharing the information for the very first time. I know that you've been working on that research for extensively, and we will make sure to link down everything what Sara has been working. Please, everybody subscribe and see what her organization is doing, because guess what? It is important. And I think I wanted to summarize and have a last question, which I think will arise. And right now, why I was like going deeper to globalization and localization, I was meaning in terms of political security, because a lot of countries will say, you know what, let's not source from that country. Let's grow local. So a lot of countries will go protective, and they will say, you know what, if we grow local, it will be more protected. But there are so many countries that agriculture export is very dependent, right? And for them, they will be against that, saying, hey, okay, you're going to grow, but who I'm going to sell it to? So I think the bamboo forest idea of, if you keep doing it anyways, I mean, I will still want the banana from Ecuador. I will still want to coffee from Costa Rica. I will still want to have gelato. I mean, I'm talking about processed food from the Italy. It's not going to change, but it will adapt, right? So the countries shouldn't be afraid, and leaders shouldn't protect and say, you know what, let's cancel all the food from X country and have it. So I think
this is the point. We cannot be just so narrow. We need to bring diversity and balance, but make thoughtful decisions. So this is the thing. We cannot make restriction, because food is part of our also mental health. So I'm not talking about something that is just physical, but food is feeding also our emotions. So
Absolutely.
the decisions can affect that. I'm not saying that we need to protect and just to be so narrow, but we need to bring diversity, but also making thoughtful choice. If I'm growing tomato here, does make no sense to bring the same tomato from the opposite side of the world, because it's not sustainable and makes no sense if I'm wasting tomato here. So
Yeah.
makes no sense. We need to balance and make thoughtful choices.
And also, I think this is a very part of the work is that the agriculture have been same. I'm not talking about like majority of the like several countries that took a huge leap, but the agriculture hasn't changed for 1,000 years, isn't it? It didn't evolve. We still use the basic principle. We don't use water efficiently. We don't use the resources efficiently. Just we use the same techniques as like 10,000 years ago. So maybe right now it's the era of agripreneurs, smart people, and using the technology and embodying the technology, injecting the technology to their sphere. I think that will bring another revolution to this sphere, if you support this idea.
And absolutely. And I think we need to support the farmers and the young farmers, because the farmers are the one really caring about our nature, the one that are developing our biodiversity, protecting some traditions. And sometimes nobody think about the farmers, but anyway, every day we're all eating. So if we're not caring about who is feeding us at the end, and it's not the big brand feeding us, at the beginning there is the farmers also. So I really would love people to think about who's there growing their food every single day. And if you think about how cheap is food sometimes, and if you think about the long way the food should do to arrive in our table, you can also imagine how very short value we give to the ones that are the older of all of this heritage.
Yeah. So basically fair trade, and we have to respect every part of the supply chain. I think this part is coming. And Sara, as I said, this is amazing conversation. I could go for hours, but please guys, search her.
Thank you
She
so
has
much.
amazing TED speaker interviews on her website, and you can find more about that. And for now, I think we had a very good conversation, Sara. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And it was a really good. I hope we can continue this conversation sometimes later.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck for
Grazie.
everything, and keep safe. Keep safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.